Welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you have not already subscribed to this channel, please feel free to do so now or at the end of this video. Today I'll be talking about Eurocentrism, a term that we very frequently use in postcolonial studies. And I think we by and large have an idea of what it means. But I'll start with a very simple definition of the term from Wikipedia. And the reason I use Wikipedia is because it's readily and freely available to everyone. So Wikipedia defines Eurocentrism, a way of thinking the world or talking about the world in which the normalized way of imagining, thinking, or talking about the world refers to the meaning-making processes in Europe. And of course now that this is from me, also in America. So Eurocentrism as a practice, a culture, or as a tradition lives on or happens anytime when someone internally, imperceptibly even imagines that the European time, European history, European ways of looking at the world are natural and everything else needs to be compared to that. Now, of course, there are historical reasons for this, and some of those we are aware of: colonialism, the power of the West, economic and political, and of Western universities and knowledge-producing locations, right? But according to the editors of the key concepts of postcolonial studies, and I'll post a link to their work in the description, the earliest grand example of Eurocentrism is the 1659 atlas produced by Girardo Mercator. Okay, so and it's called the Mercator Projection. Now, what Mercator did, he was producing an atlas of the world, mostly for navigational purposes, but he uses an equation or a mathematical formula so that he can plot different parts of the world on his map so that navigational aspects of it are more useful. But in doing so, what he does is that as he moves north from the equator, the size of different places and contents gradually keep increasing. Visually, what it does is it centers Europe. And then things north of equator keep getting bigger and bigger, even though in actual size they are smaller than the same things or places south of the equator. So that is a grand example of cartography, not just centering Europe in the middle of a map, but also making other places look smaller than Europe itself. In humanities and social sciences, of course, we can find multiple examples of Eurocentricity. In anthropology, for example, the studies of other cultures, ethnography, was usually always from a European point of view. That's why the terms civilized and primitive could be used so easily, because the Europeans could take their own living standards, their own social system as the norm and measure everything against it. So that was the Eurocentricity of studying other cultures or other humans or other places of the world. In literary studies, of course, this comes across as all those novels of Africa, H. Rider Haggard, even though he had great love for Africa, but the Europeans always are intellectually superior to Africans, and all of that then is represented in a way in which Europe comes across as stronger, more potent, of course, more developed and civilized. All of these in literature are instances of Eurocentricity, or looking at the world from a purely European perspective and privileging the European perspective. Same happens in historiography. The history of the world traditionally is history of Europe, right? If you think of the great civilizations when they were taught to you, what do they teach? Greece, right? No one teaches China or other places which preceded in their civilizational march that of Greece and the Roman Empire. So how do the postcolonialists deal with it? In postcolonial studies, of course, we challenge the imperceptive but also open privileging Eurocentricity. The whole project of postcolonial studies is to insert these silenced, marginalized voices into the dominant narrative. And a great example of that is, of course, Edward Said's Orientalism. And the reason that's an important book is that not only is Said pointing out how the Europeans create the Orient in their own image, but also that they need that image to stabilize their own cultural identity, but that it is not done accidentally. Right? There are historians recording the Orient, there are novelists writing about it, poets writing about it, romanticizing it, and out of all of this view of the Orient by Europeans represented in the text, then emerges a Eurocentric view of the East. It could be romantic, as in the early Orientalists, or if you look at the American Arabists and others, they could represent it as a menacing place, as a threatening place. So anytime a text or a work of research takes the European norm or the American norm now as natural, as privileged, and as universal, it is a form of Eurocentricity. Okay? And our job as scholars then is to challenge it, and not just to say that East is better than the West, but to say that our voices, our histories, our literatures must also be included. And there are major debates in post-colonial studies about it. You can read Ngugi Thiong'o's work, Chinwe Zhu's work, works by most South Asian scholars, and of course Edward Said. So overall, to conclude, anytime someone deals with the world, reads it, works in it, imagines it, by assuming that the European way of life, that the European civilization, laws, culture, and also, of course, North American are the norm, are superior, or are universal, they are being Eurocentric. And this applies to races, this applies to ethnicities, national identities, everything. And our job as post-colonialism scholars, of course, is to challenge that. That's all I have today. Until next time. And thank you so much for joining me. And as I said, please do subscribe. And remember, there are two important things in the world: peace and love.